In DC, for DC. DC Radio, 96.3 HD4 and DCRadio.gov.
Thank you, deep-voiced person, funky backbeat. Indeed, this is not a council hearing. This is hearing the council. You can't have a government without a council, so you can't have a government radio station without a council show. This is it. We are not coming to you from the train track enclosed nerve center like we normally do. We're coming to you from my home and the council members. Never expected to say that. I'm Josh Gibson, Director of Communications for the council. You may also know me as the council's voice on social media at Council of DC. Listeners, this is a special round of hearing a council interviews, one we never expected to have to do and hope that we'll never have to repeat in the future. This is a special COVID edition of the council. So let me introduce my guest, as always, the first guinea pig guest of each new round of hearing a council, Ward 1 council member, Brianne Nadeau.
Hey,
thanks
Josh.
for joining. So this is an unexpected circumstance, the first of many that we've had to deal with going back a month or so. Talk to me about how you're experiencing this as a council member. This is your role is to serve your constituents, but you never thought that you'd be serving them in quite this way.
Yeah. So Josh, you know that I'm the chair of the Human Services Committee. And so part of my job as council member, in addition to serving the people of Ward 1, is really to make sure that we have resources available for our most vulnerable residents. So, people experiencing homelessness, people with disabilities, people who are in need of our social safety net. So that's been my major focus since this all started. I mean, as a ward council member, there's also a lot of day-to-day work that we do for constituents that's still ongoing. When we first started working from home from our office, and when we were encouraging others to do the same, we definitely saw, a lot of calls and emails from folks who were trying to interpret the mayor's orders or trying to figure out the ways that they could keep themselves safe and not get others sick. And we've also seen so many people volunteering and really giving their time and money to help others who really need the assistance. Maybe they can't go out and get their own groceries because they're immunocompromised or high risk in other ways. And so we've got a couple of networks in Ward 1 of volunteers that are doing some really incredible work. So it's been very much day-to-day changes in what the government's doing and what we're asking others to do. And I think in general, the public has been incredibly patient and understanding and cooperative in helping us keep everyone safe. So I've been very proud, in particular, of the Ward 1 residents.
And do you think the government is rising to the challenge?
I do. And I think working together in a way that, sometimes politics don't allow. I think this is definitely a situation where we need to put politics aside and rise above that. And our mayor and our Department of Health have really been leading the charge here. Council's been very supportive of the mayor and working with her to make sure she has the tools she needs. I have to say that by far, I think the Department of Human Services has just exceeded all expectation and even capacity that we thought they could potentially have in the way that they're stepping up to help people who are really vulnerable, whether it's people who are homeless who are at risk of contracting the disease or people who have contracted the disease and need isolation. They've actually opened up several additional sites so that they can provide people with individual hotel rooms and care that they need. They're providing, they're operating hotlines to help people get services throughout the city. They've moved, in a very short period of time, they moved all services online so people don't have to apply for their public benefits now in person. So many people now are finding themselves in need of food assistance, cash assistance, unemployment benefits. things that they never in their wildest dreams would have thought they needed. And then, of course, so many people who already were receiving those benefits really still need that support. And so we've taken a system that was largely based on in-person interactions and moved it to a phone and internet-based system within a matter of weeks, which, I'm not a tech person. So in my mind, we should always be able to do these things, quickly. But I also know there's a lot of infrastructure. I mean, when you're talking about technology, someone has to build that system. And so I've been really impressed with the way Department of Human Services has stepped up in my cluster in particular.
Yeah, it's there have definitely been some comments, some justified about applying for unemployment and the challenges of applying for
Yeah.
The analogy I would make is, imagine if you were a restaurant that served fancy Italian food and you had a maximum capacity of 100 people, and then all of a sudden people were asking you to serve Mexican food to 1,000 people.
Yeah.
You could probably do it, but man, you would have to make some real staff adjustments, equipment adjustments, and I think given the magnitude of the increase of demand and the total scope in terms of what's expected of them, clearly we need to do better.
Yeah.
But I think they've reacted remarkably.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So the Department of Employment Services is the agency that oversees unemployment benefits, as you might expect, and that department and Councilmember Silverman have worked really hard to get that system working for everybody. We've given benefits to something like 53,000 people in the past 4 weeks, and the system, I think at one point the city administrator was saying the system was essentially taking in the volume that we would expect for a whole year in a matter of a few weeks. Which isn't to say that anybody's frustration is misplaced, because if you're needing unemployment benefits, you're not in a good spot. And so we are doing everything we can to get those benefits out the door. And actually millions of dollars have been paid out in March and April already. One of the things that happens is there's a little bit of a lag. So council passed legislation to say, okay, there's going to be no work search requirement and there's going to be no waiting period. And that goes into law. But then, as you mentioned, the system has to update. So someone has to go back and write the software to change the forms so that when you're applying online, those things take effect, and it takes a minute. I was reading an article recently about how the systems across the country, the unemployment benefit systems, are based on like the original coding from 50 years ago. And they were actually looking for people who knew how to do that coding, because it's not what we do anymore. And my grandfather,
COBOL.
What's that?
Computer.
COBOL. Yeah. So, yeah. So my grandfather was one of those computer programmers back in the day. In fact, in 1999, he was wandering around telling everybody that he caused Y2K, just like a total grandpa joke. But I sent him a message and I said, Grandpa, like, is this the thing that you did? Like, do you know how to do this? And he was like, well, yeah, but I mean, I'm 86 years old and living in assisted living now. So it's not really something I can get up and help with, but it's an interesting thing, right? Because that's the generation that built that technology, and apparently it hasn't been updated. Now, I'm not saying that's our system, but I was interested to read that article. I mean, we're learning a lot about our country's infrastructure during this crisis, and the gaps. And I'm hopeful. Okay, hopeful might be too strong of a word, but I am hoping that our federal government is going to try to resolve some of these issues as we emerge, because we can't suffer like this in all, with all these systems not working right.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, there's, if it ain't going to fix it, is an expression for a reason. But at some point, you have to, there's such risk aversion. I think particularly in the days of social media, if one little thing goes wrong, everyone hands you your head. So during better, people were reluctant to take a functioning UI system offline to put in a new system.
For sure.
And when you put a huge demand on a system that's decades old,
yeah.
Lesson, and don't just go back to our old easy but flawed ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. back to the vulnerable population, since I know that's your key focus, or one of your key
Yeah.
focus. There's something cruel about a stay-at-home order for people who don't have a home or
Yeah.
are victims of domestic
Oh, yeah.
home at home or live in substandard housing. What can you talk a bit more about what's being done to address those folks?
Yeah, it's a really difficult one. And I know we've seen, we've heard, I guess, interestingly, I don't know that there may be a disconnect between the data and what we're hearing from the advocates on this. And, I always try to listen to the advocates, but we do hear that there's been more domestic violence. And that's always a concern when people are confined in different spaces, in close spaces. So that's a tough one. I mean, there isn't an easy answer for how do we help people who have not a lot of space to spread out. You may have, 2 adults and several children in a smaller apartment. We already know that we have issues with housing stock not being safe and dignified. And that is all exacerbated when folks have to stay home. So, one of the things that we're still working on with the mayor is opening up more sidewalk and road space for people to go out and walk safely. So there can be more room, more social distance between us when we're out. We get a lot of complaints about just, the sidewalks are too narrow for you to really properly social distance when you're out on a walk. So we're working with DDOT on that. They've closed some of the roads into parks and things like that, which is helpful. But what I think we really need is just on residential streets, even, maybe taking away a lane of traffic on certain roads where people can sort of spread out, whether it's on foot or by bike, giving people more safe options outside. And really continuing to emphasize the importance of social distancing when you're outside. Now we're also getting more guidance on wearing cloth masks when we're outside, which is not a replacement for social distancing because the masks protect you a little bit, a certain percentage, depending on what type of mask, but the social distancing is still critical. So I think it's mostly about giving people more options for safe outside activities. But when we talk about homeless individuals in particular, there's a number of things we're doing. So again, when we have either people who are in shelter or unhoused on the street that we believe fall within a vulnerable category. And to be honest, if you've been living on the streets and you're chronically homeless, most likely you do have some related health issues that are going to make you more vulnerable. So for those folks, we're giving them individual hotel rooms as a preventative measure, not just if they've contracted the infection. And we also have individual hotel rooms for unhoused people who are infected with COVID-19. We're in shelters, keeping them open 24 hours so people don't have to leave during the day and sort of be out and about and, be at risk of contracting COVID-19. And whenever anyone does go out and return to the shelter, they're screened by one of our partners at Unity Health to make sure they haven't developed a fever or any other symptoms. So we're doing a lot of things to keep people who are unhoused safe. For those who are still living on the streets, we've put up, I think it's now 32 hand washing stations and 9 portable toilets. And I think we're going to have more portable toilets coming as well. Some of those are near the encampments that we've all learned about over time. And some are just in more heavily trafficked areas where we know unhoused people are visiting.
Right. I mean, I know one of the bills that you pushed for since you got on the council was availability of public restrooms.
Yes.
Do that in this country. And guess what? You shut down McDonald's and Starbucks, and not
That's
only
right.
a number of us, knock on wood, fortunately, house people who rely on those if we're out for a long walk and nature calls. But Lord knows if you're someone who is homeless, you've lost access to virtually all restrooms, and that's a fine situation and a real public health issue. So talk a bit about
Absolutely.
your crusade for.
So we've been working during the crisis with the Lou Committee of the People for Fairness campaign, who were the leaders on the public restrooms campaign. And they have worked with us in DHS to get the hand washing stations and the porta potties, the portable toilets that we've put in place. And I think there's just a desire for more. We've made clear, my office, I've made clear to the Department of General Services that we think it's perfectly appropriate to use the funds that were set aside for the public restroom initiative incentives for small businesses to be used for this purpose during the emergency. My understanding is they haven't needed to do so, but because the businesses are closed, no one's going to be getting paid out for an incentive to keep your bathroom open right now. And so that money, ostensibly this fiscal year, is just sitting there. That's separate and apart from the permanent restrooms that we've put into the capital budget this year that we still hope will get to be built. The issue with moving forward on that right now is there's a whole public input process as to where those should go. And it's very hard to implement a public input process right now. So that's kind of on hold.
I believe the first public restroom is going a half block from my house, which I'm going to assume is a coincidence.
It's a coincidence. And it's also not from that budget. It was perhaps just the good sense of Department of General Services and Parks and Rec to put a standalone public restroom at the Walter Pierce Park as it's being renovated. So we are very excited about that.
And I will ask my fans, please do not start clustering around Walter Pierce Park now that you know it's a half block from where I live. So you said that the DGS was not having to dig into the incentive money for private businesses. Speaking of needing to dig into money, the latest the CFO has told us is that we are, for this fiscal year, which is basically over, we'll cut probably about 607 million on the $2.2 billion budget. Do you have a sense of how deep of a cut that is? Is this the happy hopey things we wanted to have happen are not going to happen, or is this something that are we going to be looking at cuts to of a magnitude that really cut deep and hurt, and things that we assumed we'd always would have to go away?
So let me first make a very important political point. So put on your political point alarm. $600 million is about the amount that we were shafted by the federal government in the CARES Act.
Right.
So the importance of Congress allocating that money to us is very clear. It would have been better for us to get it all and to be able to use it only for response and recovery. But at the moment, getting it all and being able to use it to fill that budget gap would also be helpful to the extent that it's allowable for those purposes. But in any case, there's a way to offset, reserve funds and federal funds in a way that wouldn't hurt as badly if we could be made whole by the feds. So I think we need to keep that in mind.
We're looking at a similar sized hole in the budget that we're supposed to be looking at right now.
Right.
Until May 6th by COVID.
Mm-hmm.
The last I heard, again, it's a similar number.
Yeah.
At that time, it's across 12 months and not 6. But
right.
People say, "Oh, we have this big federal check coming. We have all these rainy day funds. Let's finally use them." And the magnitude of the problem is so large.
Huge, right. So you think about, people do like to talk about the rainy day fund as though it's a magic fix for all kinds of things. And the thing to keep in mind is a $1.5 billion rainy day fund is essentially 2 months of operating expenses for the government, right? It's really a great fund for plugging holes here and there, but it's not something that can keep us running indefinitely. And when you don't have revenue from hotels, restaurants, theaters, all of these entities, then you're looking at way more than the reserve fund can handle. So when you asked your question about, are we doing a haircut? Are we doing some deep cuts? Think about it this way. For those who've done budget advocacy, most of the time, a big ask in budget advocacy is like $5 million to $20 million, right? I mean, folks will come in and say, we need $5 million for school-based mental health care. We need $20 million for, another education program, or, for housing homeless folks, or, whatever it is. Those are huge numbers, right? I mean, when you're talking about the Human Services Committee or the Education Committee, or any of us who are really trying to meet budget gaps in the council's part of the budget process, that's a lot of money to find. So compare that to $607 million. I mean, we're talking about deep cuts from lots of places. And, I think that's the thing, that's the thing that the CFO and the mayor are working on right now. And I do not envy that position. And I do not envy, I'm not looking forward to the receiving the budget in May and having to see where those cuts were made and think about, how we're going to, as a council, change the budget to meet what we think the urgent needs are. I think this is a really difficult situation all around. And I'm worried. Maybe less about the human services programs, which tend to be more entitlement based. But, a lot of the other programs that we've seen that receive a little bit of money here, a little bit of money there, they're really going to be hurting, I think.
Right. And I mean, just to take a very recent example, the second emergency bill the council passed, which did not have aid in it for undocumented workers.
Right.
There's some discussion about whether this was the right or wrong amount, but it was $80 million would have been the cost of that program. And people tend to stovepipe these conversations. Should we or shouldn't we do that? And then in a separate stovepipe, we have to cut $600 million from the current year.
Right.
What really you're saying is we can do the aid to undocumented workers, but then the other, it crosses the line. Then it means we have to cut $700 million up to from this year. Very possibly is the right thing to do, but you just have to. You can't consider things in isolation. It cuts across.
Right, and you have to think about too. I mean, where are the cuts coming from, and are they going to impact the same people? Right. So we had to fight for a couple of years to get about $2.5 million in the budget for legal assistance to undocumented residents. Right. And that is oversubscribed, that program. Right. So you think about programs like that haven't been around that long, where are they going to be on the chopping block? And that's the other thing that wasn't in this round of legislation that I'm working on still with the chairman and with Councilmember Grasso and the advocates is support for our early childhood providers. Because my big concern is we may not be doing enough to keep everybody afloat. And if they can't reopen when we're ready to reopen, people won't be able to go back to work. That's huge.
And the other thing that I don't think folks are thinking about is the fact that even in the remarkable good times we've had, economically for the past few years, we still rely on nonprofits to do a lot of what in other countries around the world would be government work. And with nonprofits struggling and sadly, inevitably, a number of them failing during these times, not only are we going to have a tighter belt for ourselves, but we are not going to be able to rely on them. And we're going to have to gap fill things that they might have been doing before. But instead of doing it through grant money that we don't have, we may have to do it ourselves. I mean, it really changes.
Yeah. No, it's a really good point. And this is an issue that I was dealing with a couple of weeks ago, because you think about most of the services we provide through partners, right? We have every meal we provide is through a contract. Every human service we provide, not every, but we have so many community partners who are providing, say, the mental health counseling that goes with permanent supportive housing. Or, the day-to-day services that the senior centers provide are largely run by nonprofit partners. And if they aren't able to fully do their jobs right now during the stay-at-home order, how are they getting paid and how are they getting made whole? So we've been having these conversations, and I think actually that we've largely resolved most of these payment issues because we need these organizations to exist, right? We can't implement the majority of the programs we do without them existing. So, for example, with permanent supportive housing, the Department of Human Services has been able to work with providers to arrange payments based on, what they would be getting paid if they were doing full services. With any Medicaid-based service, our government is applying for a waiver that actually would allow people to get paid based on last year's service provision, as an example. Even though they might not be making as many home visits, they're doing more phone visits, and that'll help keep those entities whole. And with the Department on Aging and Community Living, folks who used to be working in a senior center or going door to door, whatever they do with their seniors, now their job is to make phone calls all day, checking on the seniors they serve to say, hey, how are you doing today? Have you heard from any family? Do you need any food? Do you need any other services? And just, that idea of preventing social isolation among our seniors. I've been really proud of the way our government has adapted to the needs of our residents and also the needs of the providers when it comes to getting paid. I also should mention, and I've been really impressed with, hold on. I'm back. Sorry. You probably could still see me, but I couldn't see you. So we have a senior meal program that largely our senior meals had been on congregate sites, meaning people would go to a place to eat together. That's obviously not safe right now. So the department and their partners, which includes organizations like Terrific Inc. and Iona and Seabury, moved from having about, I think, 250 some people getting meals delivered to like 3,500 more people signing up in a week to get meals delivered. So they had to build up the infrastructure really quickly. There were some bumps in the beginning, but now the way it works is everybody gets one delivery a week with 7 meals. And it's Yellow Cab and Seabury that's doing the deliveries, and they're working with the lead agencies in each ward to get them to the people who need them. And it's been, again, like we're implementing all these things for the first time in huge scale. It's not without any complication, but I think really a tremendous effort overall. So, and folks can still sign up for those programs. So
now, one question I have is thinking of life after COVID. It's kind of what you wish for, that government has shown remarkable flexibility and adaptability. When this ends, are we ever going to be able to say we don't have the speed or flexibility or nimbleness to do X or Y? When, thank God, I think we've risen to the challenge and have shown that nimbleness and flexibility and
yeah. So I think yes.
Expectations on government.
Yeah. No, I think yes. I mean, I think one of the things we're going to have to demonstrate to the public is at what expense we were able to ramp up this quickly. It costs a lot of money to scale these programs up as quickly as we did. And, we will eventually have the numbers to show that those aren't sustainable. And I will say too, the government workers who've been standing up these programs and the community organizations that have been standing up these programs are working around the clock. They're around the clock. They're in jobs where they're putting themselves in risk. In some cases, they're away from their families. And for their own mental health, that's also not sustainable. So I think those are the things that we need to look at. I mean, there are some changes we've made that I think we should certainly keep going, right? Like the Department of Human Services just put all the applications online. Well, we're not going to take them off, but we're not going to go back to saying, well, you can no longer apply online. Do I think we're going to get to keep receiving alcohol delivery? I don't know. I think that's another thing people would love to see keep going. I'm not opposed to it. I'm also not necessarily the one who's going to make that decision. But I mean, there are certain things like that, right? That, well, now that we've done it, can we ever go back? I think to the extent that these things cost a lot of money in personal investment from the people implementing them, we have to figure out the right way to scale them back at the right time, and really evaluate which of them can continue on without that type of personal and monetary expense.
Gotcha. Now we're getting closer to the end of our time. Let's pivot real quickly and ask how you're dealing with this as a young child at home, and how are you doing with this personally?
Well, we had a flood on Monday in our house, and that was not awesome. So that was the bad way to start the week, but I think we're through that now. So I always try to put my experience in the perspective of, my husband and I both still are working, right? We have jobs. We're very lucky. And
Zoe was laid off, unfortunately.
Well, Zoe's daycare is closed, but they do a morning circle time via Zoom, which is really confusing, I think, to toddlers. I mean, sometimes she enjoys it and sometimes it stresses her out. And so that's been sort of interesting. I think it's definitely a shift, and it sort of exacerbates that sense that I as a working parent have always that sense of guilt of when I'm away from my kid, and, I should be spending more time with her. Now we're all here together. And yet, because we're both working, neither of us is spending the kind of time with her that we think she deserves and getting the attention she deserves. And so I know a lot of parents are struggling with that. And I always try to put it in context. We're stressed out, we're struggling, but we're safely housed. We are economically secure, and we're very, very fortunate. It certainly doesn't diminish the experience that we're having or the stress that we're feeling, but it's, everything has to be put into context. And I just don't know. I mean, as a parent, I worry like how this is going to impact her long-term, the amount of TV she's watching. And, today, I mean, the big fight we have right now is that I want her to go outside, and she says, no, I want to watch TV. And I feel like, really having to push the issue. No, we need to go outside at least once a day so you can remember what outside is like. So we want every family to have, those options. As we said in the beginning, we were talking about people who are confined to close quarters, how important it is to be able to get outside. Want everyone to be able to do that safely. We bought her because, so when I've put on my cloth mask, it's really freaked her out. So we're trying to figure that out, because it's not very productive to try to take a toddler outside while she's having a tantrum because you're scaring her with your face mask. So I'm trying to get some that look maybe more normal than my homemade ones. And then we bought her one of those little, because it's not safe to put masks on children who are too small. So we bought her a sun hat that has like a clear protective, almost looks like a beekeeper hat.
Yeah, like a visor.
Like a visor. Yeah. It kind of looks like when you see people in ICU wearing the PPE that goes all the way across, but it's like on a sun hat. So we bought her one of those. We figure she picked it out. So we hope she'll wear it. But, it's little stuff like that. I mean, my husband works in healthcare, not on the front lines, but he's spent the past 3 weeks working 15-hour days straight through the weekends, trying to reorganize the workforce for the company that he's at. So he's been moving 3,000 people into different jobs so that they can better serve their patients and take some pressure off the hospital system, because they do primary care and all the other stuff. They don't have their own hospitals. So the more they can do to flatten the curve with their patients, the less pressure there'll be on our hospital system. So it's really, we feel lucky that we're getting to do really important work right now. And both of us, I think, are really just hoping it's enough, because there's so many people out there who are really struggling.
Do you know folks that have COVID, that have tested positive or?
Yeah, we do. Unfortunately, he had a acquaintance from college who died a couple weeks ago. he's only 34. So, it's a young person. My mom and sister both work in a healthcare system in Detroit as well. And so they have colleagues who've contracted it. And we did have a friend from daycare whose father also contracted. So it's, I think we're all going to know people, unfortunately. And we're just hoping that we can get folks through to the other side healthy.
Yeah. Well, let's quickly, and we've never done a live one before. I'm just very quickly going to go into Facebook and see. I don't think anyone has sent questions, but
we can wait and see. Yeah, I'm here.
Quickly go over to a couple of quick closeout questions, and you'll be free to return to plumbing and children.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Well, while I'm doing this, why don't we actually do the question? So what is the strangest thing you've eaten since you've been quarantined?
So I don't know if you know, I am 5 months pregnant.
We may be breaking.
Okay, let me see if I can give you a bump shot. Hold on. Oh, it's there. There's a bump.
Yeah. I also am 5 months pregnant, according to
the bump meter. Yeah. So my thing this time is garlic stuffed olives and also fruit snacks.
Okay. Oh, now I'm actually playing this, so that's not helpful.
No.
Okay, I think that. Try that one more time. So those are your go-tos, or are those your things you've been reduced to eating?
Well, so no, those are my pregnancy cravings. It's also Passover, and I have not been doing a very good job of following the Passover rules of unleavened products. We were supposed to be on a baby moon this week because it was council recess. And we're supposed to be on a cruise. And I had told myself, oh, well, it's a baby moon, it's a cruise. We'll do Passover Seders and then forget it. You're not going to do the rest of the unleavened thing for the week. So I kind of just said, all right, well, we didn't get our cruise, so I'm still not holding myself to Passover rules because it's just too hard. So kudos to those who are still following all of the Passover laws. We are eating lots of matzah anyway, but not only matzah.
Would you like think Passover joke I wrote while in high school?
Yes, please.
Did you hear about the convenience store that only serves Jews during Passover?
No.
7 Unleavened.
Oh, God. Wow.
This is not new. The way I am now is sadly the way I've always been.
Yeah, well, you've now, since that time, you've really cultivated it, and you think made it your shtick.
We're finally honed. So we did, believe it or not, get one question on Facebook Live, which is, how well do you think DC is doing enforcing the stay-home laws and safe distancing?
So I think our success at enforcing the stay-at-home order is wholly dependent on the cooperation of our residents. And I want to say that, at least in Ward 1, from what I've seen on our strolls or, running errands, is that people are doing a very good job. The challenge is there's only so far we can go in enforcement, unless you want to start locking people up, which I don't. And I don't think the mayor does. And frankly, that creates a whole nother issue where you could be exposing, folks in a jail or in a police precinct to COVID-19. So, what the enforcement options we have are our Parks and Rec staff, our rangers are out patrolling and getting people off fields and fenced in areas, and our police are doing the same. In general, they're trying to do that in a way that limits contact. So using the loudspeaker or, talking to folks from the car or out the window. They do disperse crowds and sometimes people come back. And so I think this is about us continuing to educate people and remind them of the risk that they're placing themselves in and others. So I think we're doing our best, but it really, really depends on the cooperation of our residents.
And now going back to our previous topic, because you brought it up, as someone who's expecting in a time of COVID, how do you feel about that? And with that, level of stay at home and what level our hospitals will be at.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question. So I'm due in September. I'm very hopeful that by then we'll all be back to our lives. But, we're doing some things. We're trying to get more midwives certified right now so that we have extra capacity for labor and delivery. I've had a couple constituents who've given birth in the past couple of weeks we've talked to about, ensuring that you can have your partner with you. There are some states that had eliminated, you could have no one with you, not even one person, which, I can't imagine. I mean, labor can go on for days for some people, and that is really a hardship to be alone, especially in a healthcare system that's already overburdened. So it's not as though you've got, someone hanging out with you that's a nurse or someone else, just on your own. So I think we've done a good job of preserving people's supports there. We have jokingly discussed a home birth, which is not the kind of thing that I really would choose for myself personally. But since my husband grew up on a farm and has delivered quite a few livestock in his day, we have talked about it as, if we have to, we can do it. But I have my 20-week ultrasound on Friday. So we're hoping that everything will be good and we can keep planning for the hospital birth that we had anticipated. But I know it's a stressful time for a lot of people, and all of our healthcare providers are doing their best to keep those types of things happening normally and safely. So
do we? My own experience, but is it 20? How many weeks do you get the gender?
We did it through a blood test. So this would be the 20-week ultrasound is normally when you can see. But a lot of people do a blood test earlier, especially in an older pregnancy like mine, because you're looking for genetic things as well. So we already know we're having another girl, and Zoe is very excited about her baby sister.
Awesome. I'm team girl. So that's great.
Yeah, you're a girl dad. So
one more silly question. So what song have you had on repeat to keep you company?
I have been playing a lot of Indigo Girls. So we cracked down and did the Amazon Music subscription, mainly so that the little one could listen to Frozen on demand, which I'm regretting. But a lot of Indigo Girls, a lot of Dixie Chicks, a lot of Pink. Today, Bruce Springsteen was doing a live concert on his Sirius XM channel. So I was listening to that. And I'm trying to expose Zoe to some of the 80s classics. So we did some Huey Lewis and the News, some Lionel Richie, and some Kenny Loggins.
Yeah, I would think Heart of Rock and Roll, starting with the kind of heartbeat, like that would be kind of reassuring.
Yeah, there you go.
So, well, I think I'd say we're out of time, but I think we're over time, actually.
Yeah.
But I'm very grateful to you, council member, for taking the time out of your day and work and plumbing travails and childcare and home education to spend a little time with us. But I think it helps folks to see face-to-face, person-to-person, and hear a bit more about the work side and the home side of you and what you're doing during this time we're all living through.
Well, thank you. And Josh, congratulations on moving from radio to visual media. I mean, that's a big step for you.
I have far, and I've always had great respect for the folks at DC Radio, but now that I'm trying to do this myself poorly, it's anxious to get back to the real professionals.
Very good. Thanks a lot. Take care.
No problem. Now, let me just because we probably have some new listeners and viewers. So, new folks, you can subscribe to our podcast on SoundCloud or wherever you listen to podcasts. And all of you, thanks very much for joining us. Tune in again next time. Traditionally, we're on DC Radio at 96.3 on your HD4 dial or at dcradio.gov. And as always, I'm Josh Gibson, and this is not a hearing. Oh, jeez.
Outtakes.
I was doing so well. This is not a council hearing. This is hearing council. Thanks. Take care, Council.
In DC, for DC, DC Radio, 96.3 HD4, and DCRadio.gov.